Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to actually install Raspbian for Raspberry Pi on VMware Workstation or VMware Player, whichever you choose to use today. Why would we do this? Well, it's actually mainly for testing purposes. I'm an avid Raspberry Pi user and actually tinkerer with it. And I've been doing it since like 2011 when it first got released. I pretty much just purchased every Raspberry Pi that's ever came out and always done new projects and Python techniques and everything else with it. The only problem I always had with it was I couldn't install it as a virtual easily or run the operating system. So I can do a lot of testing and benchmarking before I went ahead and did these projects and committed to them and pretty much ruined my Raspberry Pi SD and had to reinstall everything from scratch every time. So the nice thing about what this program does is we're able to actually install it directly now on a virtual environment. Raspberry Pi was working with Debian Linux and Raspbian, as they've always have since they pretty much started, and decided to actually come up with Raspberry Pi for desktop, or technically Raspbian for desktop. It's an ISO file you can download. It's in the description below. All you have to do is download that, and then you can actually boot it like any other ISO. So if you really want to put it on your computer as the actual main operating system, you technically can. I completely advise against this because that's not really what it's meant for, but it can work. You're just going to end up running into probably more problems because they don't have a huge driver support list and everything, so you're going to hit definitely some major problems if you actually do this. But if you wanted to work on a Raspberry Pi project, see if it's something you're interested in, you're able to actually install as a virtual and go from there now. I definitely think it's like huge leaps and bounds for the Raspbian network to be able to pull this off, because I personally have been dying to have this. There have been other ways of virtualizing it on your system here because of the ARM architect. You'd have to download some special software and then you go ahead and install it and it kind of runs, and I always end up having problems and everything, so it's always a nightmare. This is definitely leaps and bounds from it. So if you ever had the interest of using Raspbian, want to know if you can use a Raspberry Pi or what it's kind of like to use a Raspberry Pi, well, here's your chance. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and download the Raspbian image. I have the link in the description below explaining where you can get it from. It's 2.2 gigs, so it's going to take an average user about 10-15 minutes to download, maybe a little bit longer depending on your internet speed. Once it's downloaded, it's already down in an ISO file, so you don't have to worry about extracting it. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and do the install. So first things first, we're going to hit Create New Virtual Machine. We're going to do what we normally do and click on Typical. And then here, we're going to click on I will install the operating system later. You can go ahead and do the install disk here, but as you see, when you click on that, it says can't detect the operating system, and it just becomes a little bit of a pain. So just hit Next. We're going to click Linux, Debian 9 x64. Now, I already know that the Raspbian image is technically an x86, but the architect that we're going to be working on, I'm assuming you're purchasing a Raspberry Pi in 2020. So we have the Raspberry Pi 4, which uses a quad-core CPU as well as 4 gigs of RAM maximum. You can get the 1 gig, 2 gig, or 4. So for this demonstration, we're going to assume you bought the 4 gig edition. So we're going to want the actual architect to be a 64-bit architect. Don't worry, it's still going to install and obviously work, and it's not going to harm your system if you pick 64-bit or 32-bit. It's actually not going to do much different. I just always like to do, if I have more than a single core, go to 64-bit. So here we're going to name it Raspbian. Hit Next. Now with this, I always like to make it the size of the SD card I'm using. So I usually use a 32 gig SD card. You can use 64, but I just think 64 is just way too much. At that point, you're probably going to be using flash drives or whatever else and external drives to it. So you just kind of want the OS to be on your SD card and basic programs you use. So I'm going to make sure I pick 32 gigs, and I'm going to hit Store Virtual Disk as single file. You can do split multiples, it really doesn't matter. It's such a small file, 32 gigs really isn't a lot. And the actual install is only 5 gigs, I think, max with everything, even the updates and all the extra packages to install. So this is kind of overkill no matter how you look at it. So hit next. Okay, now we're going to hit customize hardware. So for this, we're going to manipulate the system to believe it is a Raspberry Pi. So memory's got to be 4 gigs because we bought the 4 gig Raspberry Pi 4. The processor, we're going to click on that and do the numbers of core per processor to be 4 gigs. I'm sorry, 4 cores. So again, because we have a 4-core processor, we're going to go with that. Now, CD, DVD, we're going to select our Raspbian ISO we downloaded. So mine's right here. Hit OK. And then for network adapter, I just want to do bridged. It just makes it easier. So you know when it first boots and it gets in there, it's got an internet connection right away. If you don't have your NAT configured right, or you did some kind of errors, or you're playing around with it, you're probably not going to get internet right away, or you have to do what you got to do. So for this demonstration, bridged is usually my go-to. I only use NAT anymore if I'm actually trying to network a bunch of virtuals together. Like say I built a server and then I want 2 operating systems to connect to it. That's when I use NAT. But for mostly when I do actual OS installs, no matter what, I usually pick bridge just so I'm guaranteed I know I have an internet connection. Alright, now this is an optional thing you can do. With USB controller, we can do 1, 2, or 3. The Raspberry Pi technically has USB 3.0, so it should have no problem being able to connect with USB 3.0 drivers. And then everything else here we can leave as default. Alright, so we're going to click on close. And then now hit finish at the bottom. And there we go. So now we're all ready to go. So up here we're going to do power on the virtual machine, and we're going to be greeted with a Debian base installer for this, because that's what this is all based on. Alright, so you have a couple options. You can do run. Run will just let it go ahead and run Raspbian as a live CD like almost all Linux systems are. So when you run this, you'll be able to be greeted with the desktop right away. You'll see all the programs, see if you kind of like it. Again, if you save anything or do anything with it, it's not going to obviously save because it's believing it's running off a CD. Then you have 2 choices of installing. You have a graphical install and a command style install. So if you kind of want to feel squirrely and go in there and do all command-based installations and not see everything, you can go ahead and do the regular install. But if you're fully aware of how to do Linux, this is what I recommend. If you're a first-time user of Linux, Raspbian, or overall just kind of lazy and just rather just do a simple click next all the time, I would go with graphical install. So hit enter. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to enter full screen mode. And it's a very basic install. Nothing extremely too difficult, too special with it. So right now we're going to click on your keyboard layout. I'm going to go with English. But again, if you don't speak English or your keyboard's not English and you want to choose anything else, as you can see here, they pretty much cover just about everything. So you can do American English, British English if you want, it doesn't matter. Alright, now what it's going to do in a second is it's going to end up copying over all extra components. It could roughly take about 2-3 minutes to do the additional component install. Also at the end of the video here, I will show you how to install VMware Tools on here so that you're not using a very small screen and having problems. Again, because it's a Debian-based Linux and VMware has Linux-based tools, it all works. So that's also another plus because a lot of things didn't work when you had to use the special virtual that they built to run Raspbian with the ARM architect back in the day. Raspbian's still on the ARM architect, so it's nothing too crazy. But for this version here, they actually made it a x86 64-bit version, so we're able to do the install that we're doing here. Alright, now this is just the basic partitioning of the disks. You can do entire disk with LVM, and for encrypted LVM. For new users, I always recommend use entire disk. I really wouldn't use either one of these two at all for the actual Raspbian build. I actually don't even think that these two are even options when you install Raspbian. They might. I probably haven't paid attention enough to realize it. But for the most part, whatever you're going to be using with it, this is all testing, so the encryption level is not required unless you're doing something that requires encryption or special user levels. So for this, we're going to use entire disk. Click continue. As you can see here, it went ahead and picked up our partitioning, our virtual drive, or technically our virtual SD card, as we're going to call it. So I'm going to hit continue. Now you have a few choices here. You have the recommended for new users, all files in one partition. I kind of recommend this overall for anybody. I don't recommend anybody doing this. I also don't believe you can actually do this natively in Raspberry Pi as well. I believe when they set it up, it takes the whole SD card, and if you want to actually split these partitions, you got to actually do special setups in Raspbian for it. So to make this as close to the Raspberry Pi as possible, we're going to do all files under one partition. Which is actually odd because it's not really one partition, it's technically two. So as you can see here, it has our two partitions that it creates. It has our primary, which is our ext4 root directory, which is where all our data is going to be stored and everything. And then you have this swap drive. What the swap drive is in Linux, if nobody knows, is it is a virtual memory setup for your devices. So because we are using 4 gigs of RAM, it actually creates a 4 gig, well, a little over 4 gig partition for memory swap. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we can do software RAID, logical volumes. If you want to encrypt the volume, you can. If you have multiple drives, I mean, this all here is mainly for if we were installing an actual Debian Linux. And again, if you're going to install this Raspbian on your computer and use it as an actual computer, you would probably want to follow the encrypted volume. The encrypted volume. You may want to install a RAID if you got multiple drives in your system. There's a lot more you can do, but again, for the Raspberry Pi, this stuff right up here is actually doesn't even bother. Doesn't even come up. If you want to do a RAID, you would have to actually install secondary software, plug in a few different drives. It's a little more convoluted than if you were just going to do a regular install. So for this case, we're going to go down here and click on Finish Partitioning and Write Changes, because everything here is up to our standards. Click Continue. Okay, again, it's just confirming here. If you do any of this, it's going to go ahead and you can't change anything right away. It's going to format the drives, so if you have anything on the drives, it will be lost, and yada yada yada. So do we want to write the changes to disk? Yes, we do, because we verified everything is good. And now we're going to format and do the install. Okay. Now, this is probably going to take a little bit longer on the Raspberry Pi than a virtual machine or your regular computer, because I am running a much stronger, processor than the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is an ARM-based processor, as I am running an x86 64-bit processor, Intel-based. So I'm definitely going to have much more speed and capabilities than what the Raspberry Pi can actually run, or at least when it comes to doing installs. And that's why they keep a lot of the files and a lot of structures very small and easy for it, so it doesn't overheat or has any kind of corruption or bogs it down doing the install. But definitely having the 4 gig variant is a game changer if you're going to the Raspberry Pi. I actually own the 1 gig, 2 gig, and the 4 gig. And honestly, the 1 gig is nice. If you're kind of learning and you just want to kind of tinker with it a little bit, it's much cheaper, obviously. If you're planning on doing a few different basic things like virtual gaming on it and everything, like Retro Pi, it's not bad. But I recommend spending the money, get yourself the higher grade, either 2 or 4. If you do have the money, get the 4. The 4 is just kind of replacing desktops. It can't replace everything, but it can actually do a lot more stuff that you won't normally do, like word processing, surfing the internet. So if you just kind of want something that's very basic and simple to use, that has internet and can do word processing, pretty much that's about it, that's not a bad solution. Obviously, it's not good for basic gaming. You can emulate on it, but using, up to, I think, the PlayStation 1 style emulation. But, I really wouldn't recommend, buying a Raspberry Pi 4 gigs or doing the install like this and emulating it. But it definitely will work 100%. You won't be able to play PlayStation 2 and, Xbox 360, Xbox games, and so on and so forth. But if you want to play Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Atari games from back in the 80s and 90s, it will run just fine. If you have a web server you're looking to start up and you kind of don't want to have to buy an actual big server, or it's just a couple pages or a simple blog like WordPress, this is perfect for that. So there's definitely a lot of good uses for the Raspberry Pi in 2020. Especially if you also kind of want to just get into learning how to program Python. This is actually how I learned to program Python, because everything that we do in Raspberry Pi is all Python based. So all the projects you do, all the coding, if you're doing using the GPIO interface, it's all Python based. So if you kind of interested about that, definitely worth it. So a lot of this is actually great, and again, the fact is that we're able to have the Raspberry Pi, Raspbian now on virtual machine. Like I said, I believe it's a complete game changer for anybody who's using the Raspberry Pi. Especially, like I said, if you don't know what you want to use. Now, Raspberry Pi has a lot of different flavors of installations. So again, this one will work on here. If you want, they do have, for instance, Ubuntu for Raspberry Pi and Linux. I believe Fedora is on there as well. Arch Linux is on there. So if you do want to test out those ones, you're more than welcome to just download, again, the x86 edition of this and install it, see if you like it. Kali Linux is also on there too. You also can make it as a Plex media server. I mean, the list goes on and on of what you can really do with a Raspberry Pi today, especially if you're just looking for something simple and easy. I've set mine up as DVRs in my house, where I was able to actually put one at each TV, link them all together to a Plex server, and I had my own custom Netflix that pretty much ran throughout the whole house. So if I went from one room to another, I was able to switch back and forth, pause the video, just kind of like if you have your own DVR in the house. Netflix cannot technically run on there. You can get it to work. It's a little bit of workaround. But yeah, I definitely think if you've never used it before, really want to kind of just check it out, this is a good starting point. Or a really good starting point was just jump right into a Raspberry Pi. Down the description below, there's links to Amazon for Raspberry Pi starter kits, in case you're interested. The Raspberry website's linked down there, as well as the link to download this system here. Alright, and like I said, it takes roughly around 5 minutes to do the full install. Okay, so we've already gone through the installation. Now we're going to install the Grub bootloader. Okay, so I want to do this, hit yes. This also isn't a part of the Raspberry Pi, it automatically boots into it, but for it to work on our device here, we're going to have to do it this way. You can enter device manually, but technically you just want to pick your hard drive. Now we only have one hard drive installed, obviously, for our virtual, so it will be the SDA. It should not say anything else, so if it says anything other than this, you probably did something wrong and you got to redo the install. So select SDA, click continue. Okay, now this should be going ahead and installing the Grub loader, and it should be done roughly a few more minutes. Again, it does vary from computer to computer, from device to device, so if anything kind of hangs up on the installation or anything, just let it go. I went ahead and just paused the video and waited for it to finish, just so I can shorten the video for YouTube. They don't really like too many long videos being uploaded all the time. So again, we're just going to sit here, and I believe this is it. I don't think, if I remember correctly, I don't think they actually go into the conversation of asking you if you want to create a user. I believe the user is just the same as you would be if you were using a Raspberry Pi, and we'll go over that once we get to that screen. So again, we're just going to hang on a little bit longer, wait for it to finish, and then we should be ready to go. Okay, so now everything's all complete. So we're going to have to remove the installation CD and then go ahead and boot. So I'm going to hit continue. It's going to go ahead and finish up. Now VMware usually on the reboot will go ahead and automatically disconnect the CD drive. So we're just going to wait for this to finish doing what it's got to do. And then after that, it should boot right into our new Raspberry Pi Raspbian desktop. Okay, the system's rebooted. And just because I want to take a look, yep, as you can see here, there's no checkbox next to it. So we don't have to worry about the CD being done. Oh, hit the wrong button. And there you go, we got your splash top for the Raspberry Pi. And now we're at the desktop. And that's it. Like I said, it takes a little bit of different times. So here it's going through the welcome screen or walkthrough. This is exactly what you're going to get when you install a Raspbian on a Raspberry Pi, what you're about to see here. So it tells me my IP address because I have a hardwired connection, and I'm bridged to my network, so I was able to actually get an IP right away. Okay, now from the set country, you should set this to whatever you are. So I'm going to go ahead and set my time zone, set everything the way it's supposed to be for me. You can pick whatever you want for yours. Okay, now this is the password for your Pi. There's a lot of tips and tricks with doing Raspberry Pi and setup. Normally the biggest thing today is when you create this account, you're going to want to create another user account. And then inside that other user account, you're going to want to disable the Pi account. The reason is, it's like kind of you're using Linux, you want to disable the root account so that nobody can accidentally just hack your system and start messing around. So for this one, actually what I'm going to, I believe if you type in the default, which is Raspberry, I think it yells at you. Oh no, it doesn't. Okay. I don't recommend making your password Raspberry because that's the default. The username is Pi, the default's Raspberry. You should go ahead and set yours up the way it needs to be with a good password. Or you can do, as I said, you can put a basic password like I just did, and then create a whole another user account later and disable the Pi in your system here so you don't have to worry about people hacking your system. Software updates. Okay, we're going to skip this for this tutorial because it could take a while. But normally you would hit next on this and then go ahead and get all your updates. Alright, and now your Raspberry Pi is all ready to go. So we're going to hit restart. And we're going to let it boot back in. And now I did say I'm going to show you how to install VMware Tools as well. So once we get back to the desktop, I will show you how to install Linux's VMware Tools in Raspberry. It's pretty much the same on any version of VMware, or not VMware, any version of Linux you download. So it's nothing, majorly different in this way as you would do it somewhere else. So as you can see here, it's a small screen. Natively with everything. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install VMware Tools. So click on VM, go to install VMware Tools, hit OK. And as you can see, it popped up. So we're going to double click and open it. And what I kind of like to do is I just like to open this and I put it right there on the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and, if I remember, extract. We're going to extract it right to the desktop. Okay, now just to open this folder up and make sure, as you can see, everything's here. Perfect. I like to rename it VMtools. Okay, we're going to open up again. Alright. So we're going to open the current folder in terminal. So you can see here it's under desktop VMtools. And now to install it, we will just have to type in exactly as you see on the screen here. Okay. And then with this, we're pretty much just going to keep bashing enter. If you know what you're installing, if you've previously installed Linux before in VMtools, you're able to set the preferences as you like. But for this case, we're going to leave everything as default. Especially if you're a first-time user, just go ahead and leave everything as default. I've done this so many times, I kind of just keep hitting enter, but I would recommend you reading and understanding where everything is or what's going on. Now they do have a secondary version of VMtools. It's called OpenVMtools, which was what we were prompted with at the beginning. If you have a problem doing any kind of install with tools with VMware, you're able to go to that website and actually download the specialized version of VMtools, which is based off of Debian and Ubuntu. And what they do is they just tweak it just a little bit. It also has a higher support than VMware. VMware produces these VMtools, so whenever they, for lack of better words, whenever they get around to it and keep updating it, that's when we get a new update, a new setup for it. OpenVMtools is, as it says, it's an open software that allows you to keep downloading and updating, and as they find new updates, they keep adding to it. Alright, so now you can see here the screen went full screen. And we are all ready to go. We now have a full setup of Raspberry Pi, or Raspbian, on our Raspberry Pi, or VM. So just go over a couple things. You got your programming here, your educational builds, you have your Office, Chromium browser, VLC, image viewer, a few games here, and you can also have a few example of Python games and build them yourself. The accessories to kind of go through the system here, and you can see there's an SD card copier. This is actually great in our case because you can plug in an SD card and you can copy everything from this build right to an SD card and plug it right into your Raspberry Pi. So you're all ready to go. You don't have to kind of reinstall everything, copy everything over, or do what you need to do. You also have Raspberry Pi configuration. I don't think it works in this build. Oh, it does. Now, this is something you normally want to use if you're going to use a Raspberry Pi. This is going to be your best friend. This is how you can change your password for Pi, change the host name, how you want it to boot, if you want it to auto log in. So if you're not actually using Pi as a user, you're going to want to uncheck that. Network at boot, so when it turns on, and make sure it can actually recognize your network card. Do you want it to see the splash screen or not? The display on the Raspberry Pi, if you're actually getting issues where you have like the double lines, screens freaking out, or so on, you can use this to go ahead and fix it. You would get a lot more interfaces, but because they were not on a Raspberry Pi, they took a lot of them away. Like you have SSH, VNC, GPIO outputs, serial cable connections. You pretty much get a laundry list of things you can turn on and off. The only time I turn SSH on is if I have to SSH into it all the time. But usually when I do that, I change my keys and everything so it's not going to be easily hackable, as well as the port numbers. And then localization is just pretty much, you can see here, all your basic stuff. So with that, then you have the recommended software. And this is pretty much the Linux software package manager that you can go ahead and in here and start downloading, anything you want. But this is only what's recommended. There is plenty more other things you can keep downloading directly from it. Also, because we didn't actually do the update, so I'll show you real quickly the command to update your Raspberry Pi. No different than it would be in Linux. So we always type in sudo, which is superadmin. apt-get, okay, which is the command to go ahead and grab applications. Update means to update all the repositories. And then the double tag here, ampersand signs, what that does is it allows you to run multiple scripts. So I wanted to go ahead and run script 1, and then with this I can run script number 2. The second one is the same thing, sudo, allowing it to know that we were going to run as a super admin. The apt-get, which tells it we want the applications to get from wherever the repositories are. And the upgrade means we would like it to actually install anything that's either outdated or not ready. And then we do tac Y for meaning yes. And as you can see here, it's running through everything to install, upgrade. This can take a little bit, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up, pausing the video here until it's all done and come back. Oh, actually, never mind. It actually updated pretty quickly. Usually these takes much longer to update and everything, but this actually, as you can see, only took a few minutes, which is actually really nice. So as it says right here, go ahead and reboot. So we're going to shut down and reboot. Okay, so we're going to just add a quick user. Alright, so say you just want to add a user real quickly so you don't have to worry about keep worrying about Pi all the time. It's very simple. So we're going to type in sudo, okay, add user, then we're going to type in the username. Okay, then you get prompted for a password, so I'm going to type in my extremely secure password. Alright, now the rest of the stuff here you can go ahead and fill out or leave blank, it's up to you. I don't have a room number, phone, not going to bother. And there we go. So now I created the user, but what I end up having to do is I don't actually have sudo abilities. So we're going to have to actually give me access to be able to run sudo as a root user. Otherwise I won't be able to do anything and it's just going to be a waste of time. So it's again, very simple code. It's going to be sudo add user. Now the name that we picked. So whatever user you just created, I created VM advisor. And then I'm just going to type in the word sudo at the end. And that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to log out. Well, actually, we're going to go down here to Preferences, and we're going to do login as user pi. So we don't want to do that anymore because I just created my new user, so there's no reason to. Go to Shutdown and click Log Out. So there we go. We have our list right here. Go ahead and log in as my new user. And there you go. We now have a new user. So if I type in sudo apt-get update, alright, you'll be questioned with this. Now the reason why you'll see this for the first time is because it's the first time we've ever created the user with a sudo up. So at this point, it's telling you right now that only administrators can do this. If you are understanding that you have to not do this without causing problems, alright, or updating the system, then go ahead and proceed. It's pretty much just a warning to let you know, with great power comes great responsibility. But as you can see here, as I typed in sudo for me, it ended up working with no problem. Okay, so say you want to delete the user pi. I do recommend this. So in our case here, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to have to reboot. So shutdown, reboot, because we were originally logged in as pi, so it actually saves the information. All right. Alright, so now we're here. Now to show everything is, oops, we have Pi still here, and we have my account. So log into the account you created. Alright, and just like how you created the account before, it's actually very simple. So we're going to type in sudo, use delete, tac R, and we're going to type in pi. Type in your password. And there we go. Now, the reason why I got the mail spool error is because, honestly, I never created a mail account for it, so it couldn't find it. What it does, it actually finds the user and deletes everything about it. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't delete the actual home directory. So if I go into, well, I actually can't see it. But if you had the actual home directory sync between everybody, you'll be able to actually physically see that. So just to verify that we went ahead and actually did delete the user account, we're just going to log out real quickly. And then you can see here there is no more. If I type in pi and type in my old password, it fails every time. So now you went ahead and secured your Raspberry Pi and you're good to go. I will be doing another video in the future more about Raspberry Pi and other things we can do on this, projects, programs to install, and so on. But I just kind of want to get the basics. So we went ahead today and we downloaded and installed Raspbian on VMware Workstation. We went ahead and installed VMware Tools on here. We went ahead and actually created a new user, and we went ahead and deleted the Pi so that we keep it secure as possible. So I feel that we've accomplished everything we were looking to do today. So, like always, everything that we did today will be in the description below. Where to download Raspbian's ID, the Raspberry Pi. I will also be linking where to purchase a Raspberry Pi if that's what you want to do. This virtual machine that we just created will also be down there as well. So if you don't even want to actually bother doing the install, which I do recommend you should, you can go ahead and have this VM all ready to go. I will be going ahead and putting the Pi back on here, the username Pi, so that you're able to log in every time, and we don't have to worry about you having to add it or any problems that come down the road. So yeah, if this video helps you or you really liked the video, thought it was interesting, put a like down below, subscribe to my account. We are doing tons of different things all the time. As you can see over here, I am doing a own cloud setup with USC. I'm also doing a video on Windows Whistler, which is actually pre-Windows XP Luna edition. So it's actually pretty cool to see how they transferred from Windows 2000 to Windows XP. And mainly because honestly the wallpapers were really nice. It was actually a pretty cool looking user interface at the time. I've done videos on all these versions of Windows already, how to dual boot. So yeah, just check out my channel, see if you like anything, subscribe again. And until next time, I'll see everybody later. So thanks for joining me.